Hi, and welcome to 2.6. We're going to look at 6 kingdoms of life. And right here, I have a little diagram that shows the 6 kingdoms. And if you start reading them, you're going to read words that you may or may not be familiar with. You see multicellular, describing some of the organisms in those kingdoms. And multicellular simply means more than one cell. So that organism is more than one cell big. And unicellular is a single cell organism. That would be an organism that is one cell large. And we have a couple of other terms, prokaryotic and eukaryotic. And those refer to the type of cell. And let's go to the next slide and look at what those words mean. Prokaryotes and eukaryotes are fundamentally different in their cell structure. Here's an example of a prokaryotic cell. A prokaryotic cell does not have some things that eukaryotic cells do. Eukaryotic cells have a defined nucleus with a nuclear membrane around it. Prokaryotic cells do not. Some of the organelles as well within a eukaryotic cell have membranes, and prokaryotic cells do not have internal membranes within their cell structure. So if you noticed, eukaryotic cells, this is a plant cell and an animal cell, and they are in different kingdoms than the prokaryotic cells. The prokaryotic cells occupy 2 of the kingdoms, and the eukaryotic cells make up organisms that occupy the other 4 kingdoms. A couple of terms that I just want to review with you before we go on. You probably already know this from your middle school science classes, but autotrophs are organisms that obtain their energy and nutrients from non-living sources, such as a photoautotroph is one that is able to carry on photosynthesis, so they can obtain energy from combining sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. A chemoautotroph will obtain their energy from inorganic chemicals in the environment. And these types of organisms are always bacteria. Heterotrophs, as opposed to autotrophs, obtain their energy and nutrients from other organisms, either dead or alive. So here this girl is eating an apple. She is a heterotroph. Now let's look a little bit at our diagram again. The kingdoms that are prokaryotic, that contain organisms that are prokaryotic, are these 2 kingdoms right here, the eubacteria and the archaebacteria. Sometimes it's simply referred to as archaea, the kingdom. These 2 kingdoms used to, not very long ago, be one kingdom called Monera. And it's probably obvious to you why they would be one kingdom. After all, they contain prokaryotic cells, and that's really different from the eukaryotic cells. However, it was discovered that the RNA sequences between eubacteria and archaea or archaebacteria are really very different. So there are some similarities between these 2, yet some of their fundamental structures are also really different. Some of the RNA sequencing is dramatically different, enough so that it was decided to make them 2 separate kingdoms. So if you are familiar with this, great, and if not, I would like to introduce you to the idea of 3 domains. All organisms can be divided into 3 domains, and those domains are archaea, bacteria, and eukarya. The eukarya basically contain all of the organisms that have eukaryotic cells. Bacteria and archaea, these domains contain all the organisms that have prokaryotic cells, but obviously they're differentiated in that some are bacteria and some are archaea. Let's look at these 6 kingdoms now. Let's start with eubacteria, and that would be right here. Eubacteria are unicellular prokaryotes. And here is an example, blue-green algae right there. Archaea, and here Archaebacteria or Archaea is the next kingdom we'll look at. They also are unicellular prokaryotes, but they differ from the eubacteria in their cell structure and in their RNA sequencing. Here's just an example of a picture of Archaea. Protista, that is the kingdom right here. And unfortunately, Protista vary immensely from one organism to another. It seems to be that it's the collection of a lot of the leftover organisms within the eukaryotic arena. So they are producers sometimes, consumers sometimes, decomposers sometimes. Some of them are autotrophs. Some of them are swimming heterotrophs, which are also called protozoa. Some of them are fungus-like protists, and there are many others. They vary very extremely much between organisms. So it's a very broad category of organisms. Plantae, the kingdom Plantae, and I will say I do not care if you refer to these in their Latin form or the English version of the Latin. So you can call it Kingdom Plantae or you can call them plants. Either one is fine. But let's look at the Kingdom Plantae. They are photoautotrophic, multicellular eukaryotes that develop from embryos, meaning egg. So all of these are very important characteristics of plants. Most of them store food as starch. They have cellulose-containing cell walls, and they have cells that contain chloroplasts. And here are some examples of organisms that are in the plant kingdom. The Animalia kingdom. They are heterotrophic multicellular eukaryotes that develop from embryos. Almost the identical definition as plants, only they are heterotrophs rather than autotrophs. They range in size from microscopic to giant whales. They are possibly the most diverse in form of all of the kingdoms. Most of them reproduce sexually. Some have exoskeletons, such as this one here. Most are motile, which means they move about with senses and nervous systems. So here are some examples of organisms that belong to the animal kingdom. Fungi, our very last kingdom, the 6th one that we're looking at. Fungi, members of this kingdom include heterotrophs that absorb molecules from their surroundings. Most of them are multicellular and decomposers. They reproduce via spores, either sexually or asexually. When I say most are multicellular, I'm giving an example of one that is not. And if you care to guess, it's one we've actually worked with so far. It's yeast. Yeast is a member of the fungi kingdom, and it is unicellular. Here is a more typical multicellular organism that is part of the fungi kingdom. Now that you know a little bit about the 6 kingdoms, if you want advanced proficiency, and I would highly encourage you because it would be a lot of fun for this section, choose one of the kingdoms, or all of them if you'd like, or more than one. Study deeper classification within that kingdom. You can report more in depth about the organisms that make up that kingdom and how they are classified and how those structures play out within individual kingdoms. So any other ideas are welcome, and I'm always excited to see what you guys have to show. So we'll see you in class.